Bugliosi says there is no question that Oswald ordered and picked up the 38th Smith & Wesson revolver that he says was used to kill Tippit. This transaction was handled at the delivery end by a private mail delivery company called Railway Express Agency, REA. REA had to abide by state laws to ship firearms, including a certificate of good character needed to be shown to the employee. There also must have been a proof of ID submitted on a 5024 form filled out for small firearms like revolvers and pistols. And this all had to have been done at REA headquarters, as the post office would not handle a private mail company's cargo. REA should have sent a postcard to Oswald's box. He then should have walked over to REA and given his identification, a certificate of good character, and this should have all been recorded in the REA office books. As John Armstrong notes, there's no evidence at all that REA ever sent a postcard to Oswald's post office box to pick up the handgun. There was no 5024 form either, or a signature of receipt by Oswald or Heidel for the package. In sum, there was no proof as to either the identity of the individual who picked up the package or the date he picked it up on. There was no proof that the transaction was ever completed and payment forwarded to the originating company, Seaport Traders. There was no proof that REA remitted payment to Seaport for the handgun. If that didn't happen, and there's no proof that it did, then what's the proof that Oswald ever showed up and paid for that handgun? The Warren report shows no bank transactions to certify this exchange. But even beyond that, there is no proof at all that the FBI even visited REA in Dallas to talk to anyone who gave the revolver to Oswald or Heidel. Now, if this transaction was really kosher, and it happens the way the Warren Commission said it did, don't you think the FBI would have been there recording all this information? Here's the guy who turned over the revolver to Oswald. Here's his signed receipt. Here's the bank transaction. Here's the remittance to Seaport Traders. Okay, well, guess what? None of that's there. If one looks askance at the credibility of Marina Oswald, and if one thinks the backyard photographs are debatable, then the chain of possession of the 38 Smith & Wesson begins on November 22nd, 1963. And by the way, I mean that literally. Because there's no back documents on that transaction. There's nothing to prove that it happened. Okay, and by the way, like I said, what makes it even worse, there's nothing to even prove that the FBI was ever at REA. So, again, this is a really part of the case that most people ignore. But it's very, very important because, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of a growing number of people, there really is not any evidence that connects Oswald to this Smith & Wesson. There simply is not a documentary record. And if Oswald would have had any kind of skilled attorney in his corner, I'm sure they would have gone over this in court. I would have loved to have gotten someone like, say, Clyde Tolson, Carter DeLoach, or J. Edgar Hoover on the stand and asked them, okay, show us the reports of your FBI agents going to REA. Show us the evidence that they collected while they were there to go ahead and prove the transaction from Seaport Traders through REA to Oswald and the remittance back to Seaport Traders. Because there's none of that in the record.